Good evening and welcome to Perspective. In the wake of the tense climate created by the recent Pak-India tensions, the political leadership of the country remains committed to dealing with the foreign policy and national security challenges that may arise. The Kashmiri brethren and their plight remains on top of the agenda. The joint session of the Parliament convened today expressed solidarity and unity in the face of any such challenges that may arise and may confront the nation. Today we will be talking about what challenges we can expect and how prepared we are. I have with me today Javed Khan Jadoon Saab, who is a journalist. Thank you for joining me today. Khusro Bakhtiyar Saab from PMLN, thank you for giving us your time.
My pleasure.
Khusro Saab, to start off with you, the envoys sent around the world to propagate our cause, to further the Kashmiri cause. I believe you were also sent to Beijing recently. What kind of response did you have from the international community?
I went to Beijing because the policy is, though Beijing is China-Pakistan relations are based over years and a very strong relationship. But the purpose to go was to sensitize especially the permanent five members of the Security Council. As you're aware, the Kashmir issue lies in the resolutions passed by the Security Council, right, which were, in fact, if I should also elaborate, India in 1948 right, took the case to United Nations Security right, Council. So it was imperative for us to sensitize these capitals. And while I was there in Beijing, we had interactions at the Foreign Ministry with the media groups in China, think tanks, academics. And what we were trying to articulate and to bring in home the message that Kashmir is an indigenous freedom struggle, and India, despite its draconian laws and the brutal use of force right, spread over decades, and the recent uprising of Kashmiri Intifada, which was reflective in the martyrdom of Burhan Wani and the funeral, which was attended by more than 200,000 people. Right. That is the message which the world needs to accept. And if that message is continued to be ignored, especially by the Western capitals, especially by the countries who have been champions of promoting human rights, right, then it amounts to giving a regime in India, which I would categorize as a very Hindu fascist regime, right, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, a license to kill. Right. And with two nuclear states, if you give some regime this license to kill, right, this will inevitably turn out to or be a resultant factor for some accident to happen in the region, which will destabilize and will have a destabilizing factor not only in the region but will go much beyond. So world needs to wake up to that reality. And I think those kind of messages, when they went to Brussels, went to Geneva, New York, London, I'm sure the world would heed into it. But India has consistently been trying to muddle the waters, to confuse the world by equating this indigenous freedom struggle with terrorism.
Right, but Khusro Saab, we've been seeing that what we've been trying to tell the world and the narrative that we've been trying to pass to the world, and we want the world to take notice. But at the same time, why are these reports coming in about Pakistan being isolated and the world maybe not heeding to the kind of narrative on Kashmir that we've been trying to tell them, you know?
See, I totally don't subscribe to this notion which is being propagated of Pakistan's isolation. I have served in the Foreign Office, and I can say it with authority that Pakistan cannot be isolated on any multilateral forums. because the dynamics of global politics are such, which were reflected recently in Prime Minister Modi's political gamble for acquiring nuclear supplies group membership and was vetoed, or he could not achieve the requisite results for India. Similarly, the composition of Security Council itself is a no-win situation. And I should admit it, it's a no-win situation currently under the dynamics of international politics for Pakistan or for India. Right. So Pakistan's isolation at that level is not possible.
Right.
Secondly, anyways, we can come back to that later.
I'll just come back to you. Jadoon Saab, like Bakhtiyar Saab is saying, he said that, it is not possible for Pakistan to be isolated. And of course, we are geostrategically located, and we do have a certain, I would say that we do have a certain level playing field. But what do you think about all these reports that are coming in as a journalist? How do you perceive them? Why is it being said that Pakistan may be isolated? Is it just rhetoric, or is there some truth to it? What do you think?
No, I think it is just the Indian propaganda campaign against Pakistan, and I would like to agree with Mr. Khusro Bakhtiyar.
Right.
And you rightly pointed out Pakistan's strategic location.
Right.
As Pakistan is a gateway to South Asia and gateway to Central Asia and gateway to Middle East and beyond Europe and Africa as well. Pakistan is a key player in the world politics, and Pakistan plays an important role for the regional security and peace as well.
Right.
Can give you an example of Afghan peace process. Without Pakistan's active participation,
right,
and without Pakistan's role as a facilitator in the Afghan peace process, nobody can even imagine that peace and security could return to Afghanistan. As far as this notion, the wrong notion is concerned, that Pakistan is being isolated, I think some wrong stories are being fed to the media. If you watch Indian media nowadays, you would see that the media is on the offensive against Pakistan.
Right.
They're concocting stories against Pakistan.
Right.
A couple of examples, you must have watched Indian TV channels, like they were pointing out that we have talks with somebody, a senior officer in Muzaffarabad.
Right.
And now we hear the stories that the media, a video is being fabricated regarding the farcical surgical strikes
right,
as well.
Right.
And I think in this farcical exercise, it's not only the Indian media, it is the Indian leadership as well, and the entire spectrum of Indian leadership.
But what can we do to even dispel this false notion that's being created against us?
Yes, I think that is an extremely important question, that how we can counter this propaganda emanating from New Delhi against Pakistan in the wake of Uri attack, and then the fake surgical strikes, the delusional kind of strikes which have never taken place in Pakistan. I think the only way to proactively counter the propaganda is to reach out to the global community. The way Pakistan is attempting to reach out, as my colleague pointed out, that they have been to the world capitals and they tried to convey the message that this is exactly the situation is. I think if you look at the whole global scenario, the ongoing the uprising in occupied Kashmir is entirely an indigenous uprising, and everybody knows that. The important international media outlets like Washington Post and New York Times, the BBC, CNN, for the first time I've seen that they have been pointing out the brutal use of force in occupied Kashmir, the use of pellet guns which have blinded more than 200 Kashmiri youngsters. And
700.
700. I stand corrected. And more than 100 youngsters have died as a result of brute use of force in occupied Kashmir.
Right.
I think Indian leadership tried to divert the attention of the global community from the state terrorism in occupied Kashmir. And in order to divert the attention of the global community, surgical strikes farce was staged against Pakistan,
and they haven't been able to prove
forced Pakistan to go on the defensive as well.
Right.
I think the two countries, the two neighbors, Pakistan and India, are nuclear armed states.
Right.
And any such, I think, even notion of attacking Pakistan or crossing the international border, or even crossing the line of control, would be suicidal, not only for the region, but it would have repercussions for the global community as well.
Right.
I think it is about time that whether we reach out to the global community or not, I think everyone in the influential capitals knows that the region as a nuclear flashpoint. Washington and London and Paris and Berlin and Beijing and Moscow, I think they need to play the role which is required right now. I think the most pathetic role has been played by the United Nations in this regard. Because if you look at their role, they have really not come out and they have not really played the role of a pacifier. India being the bigger nation, I think it is the responsibility of the global community to try and make understand India that the conflict is not in anyone's interest.
Like Jadoon Sahab is saying that the global community needs to take notice and we are doing what we can to further our cause. But the session today that was convened, and we were talking about the media and how the media in India is on a war path against Pakistan, and they're giving rise to this propaganda against Pakistan and giving this warmongering that is going on. The session today that was convened, and it was all over the media today about how we should have been united and how we should not have had an important political party sitting out, and that kind of criticism today, it has really not, it has put us in a bad light. Don't you agree?
Unfortunately, I have no option but to agree. The need for national unity and political cohesion is the basic foundation on which we can further the cause of Kashmir, especially at the times where Kashmir is going through, a third generation of Kashmiris are going through this struggle. I was hoping that the timing of this joint session should have been attended. It was such that it should be attended by all political parties. And the debate, which is still continuing, they were detracted today because of some political score settling between.
But that also we want to talk about.
That exactly. That unfortunately reflects and helps the proponents, which say that Parliament is not a repository of national trust. Parliament is not a vehicle which is articulating national policies. Parliament is not a vehicle or a matrix body which can guarantee Pakistan a better future. So as a parliamentarian, I feel that we should come up to the nation's expectations. And you'll see tomorrow the level of debate. You will see tomorrow the joint communique in which we'll have the resolution. You'll see tomorrow the kind of suggestions which would come out from the Parliament for the government to pursue for furtherance of Pakistan's foreign policy, and more so on the recent India-Pakistan impasse and the tensions which are taking place.
Right, so you're hoping that it will be better tomorrow, and you expect that it will be better tomorrow, but of course today was regrettable.
I won't say it was regrettable, but in politics where the parliamentary democracy is still finding its grounds, it's still evolving. The practices are still evolving, and I'm hoping when such incidents do take place, we should not be too serious about it.
But
tomorrow will be a
such
better
a
day.
serious cause, it should have been attended by each and every political party.
That I couldn't agree more. And timing is the most important thing in politics. Every political leader or political party should understand and correlate its political strategy according to the time or the need of the hour. And I think in that, some political parties, even in PTI itself, there was opposition within the PTI for PTI boycotting the joint session.
Right. Jadoon Sahab, the surgical strike that the manifested surgical strike, the invented surgical strike by India, it seems to, obviously, even if we suppose it's a contravention from the Simla Accord. And do you think that with all their rhetoric about this surgical strike, that they want to throw the whole Simla Accord into the bin, for example?
But I think even the farce of surgical strike is literally unraveling in India itself. We have seen that the major political party, the opposition party, Congress, has started questioning, and they started demanding the proof for the surgical strike, which is not going to be given to them, as the Indian Defense Minister today stated that it is unlikely that any proof, any video proof would be provided to Congress or to media as well. I think now it is very, very important that the people in India have started realizing the farcical surgical strikes which never took place. And it is literally has boomerang for Mr. Modi as well. Because if you look at the statement which Mr. Modi issued yesterday, was he directed his ministers, the cabinet ministers and the BJP leadership as well, not to talk about the surgical strikes issue. Even today, when Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson talked about the recent incidents, he didn't mention surgical strike. Instead, he used the word counter-terror operation. I think this is the paradigm shift now, because media literally started overblowing this situation. And ultimately, I think even the global community started questioning. I was just watching Indian channels last evening, and they were so derogatory towards CNN, BBC, and Washington Post and New York Times as well. They said, we don't give a damn about these international channels, because these international media outlets started questioning India's surgical strike, and they even started talking about that there's no proof.
India, even the sane voices in India are not being heard, so to speak. I mean, they're not, the response that they receive, people who are asking for proof are not being, I mean, they're not being looked at.
At least we have seen that India is a divided nation today. Maybe 3 or 4 days back, it wasn't so divided as it stands today. Even the Chief Minister of New Delhi, Mr. Kejriwal, he was the first one to come out and cast doubt over the surgical strikes, and he demanded that the proof should be provided to the political parties and media as well. And even we started hearing that maybe a video is being fabricated in Lipa Valley. I think India is definitely in trouble right now. Indian media, which went overboard, now I think if you watch the channels, they have started toning down the rhetoric against Pakistan. And I would particularly mention the statement of the army chief, which was issued today. He used the occasion of the passing out parade of Pakistan Air Force cadets. The statement was so categoric and I think so blunt. The message was so loud for India and for the global community as well, that any misadventure against Pakistan would be responded with full force. And the statement was so categoric that any miscalculation, the strategic miscalculation on part of New Delhi would be responded with full force and in a most befitting manner. I think this is the message. It came from the political leadership, the Prime Minister of the country. It came from the Parliament as well. And now it has come from the Chief of the Army Staff as well. I think the entire nation is with the armed forces and with the government. And this is the message. And I would tend to disagree with Mr. Khusro Bakhtiyar that this is probably a small incident. I think it was definitely required of the politicians and the parliamentarians to, in one voice, in single voice, give a message to India, to the Indian leadership that, well, the entire Pakistani nation, including the politicians, the civil society, the intelligentsia, the media, the army, on one page against India. And boycott of the parliament session on the issue of Kashmir, I don't agree that it is, I think, in my opinion, unfortunate.
Like
even today's incident,
today's
incident, the politicians, the parliamentarians started talking about issues other than India. If we know that the session was called on one single point agenda, and that was
Mr. Jadoon, but democracy is noisy. We have to live with it.
And I think that, you know, we all agree that, you know, in politics, you know, these things, and also the fact that, you know, the military leadership, the government, of course, remain on one page with regard to Kashmir, and Kashmir is on top of the agenda. Bakhtiyar Sahab, Kashmir is, do you think that's not being highlighted, perhaps because clearly, I mean, it's a reality that we're not at economic parity with India. And also the fact that we're not maybe instrumental in anybody's interests at the present, is that do you think that's one of the reasons why?
No, I think you have to, the whole Kashmir issue as it is today, you have to see it with a slightly, have a holistic view why the situation in Kashmir is today the way it is. It's primarily India's newfound misplaced confidence, reading too much into Washington's so-called policy of containment of China, and to some extent, the trust deficit, which unfortunately, to some extent, has been there from incident to incident between Pakistan and Washington over Afghanistan. So if you correlate these two situations, and secondly, we have to admit that India is a larger economy. Right. Nations are now driven by their pursuit of national interests. And India offers that kind of opportunities today. But having said that, India is also going on a path which Mr. Jadoon highlighted, the divisions in India over surgical strike.
Right.
I won't say the division in India which will become very apparent in coming years, right, is the Modi-led policy which has shaken India's two very strong foundations which its forefathers laid down, right, Nehru and Gandhi. Gandhi's foundation was secularism, and Nehru augmented his whole Indian foreign policy through non-alignment. They were the co-sponsors of non-alignment. So Modi, for the last 3 years, since he's come into power, is shaking those two very premises. And as for India media is concerned, it is being used to promulgate Indian nationalism. But you will see in times to come that this Indian nationalism you will not find in India. It's slowly converting into Hindu nationalism, right, which will itself justify the two-nation theory. And India policy makers, unfortunately, now Indian policy is being driven by NSA. Now, their National Security Advisor, who was a former DG of RAW, and their Foreign Office, which is their South Bloc, right, its advice is not being heeded. And I would, why would I say that? Is that this whole opposition to CPEC. CPEC is an economic, primarily an economic driver for the whole region. It's part of a Chinese initiative of President Xi of OBOR, One Belt, One Road, which right, covers 65 right, countries, right, and it has 6 different routes. One route goes through India and Myanmar and Bangladesh and so right, on. And India is still dragging feet on it. In fact, India, there is thinking in India that they should benefit in order for its economy to continue to grow and for more regional integration and connectivity to get into this OBOR OBOR policy and find connectivity there. So that's where I said it's non-aligned policy will find is there in Indian South Bloc, but Mr. Modi is ruling it out. Your other question was pertaining to what?
Right, I was basically trying to ask how do we change the perception?
Yeah,
then?
Perception is being changed. Let right, me be very clear with you, and I also admit where our fault lines are. Perception is it's very clear today to the world that there's a course correction in Pakistan especially on managing and fighting, eradicating the forces of extremism and terrorism in Pakistan.
Right.
And limiting the space, or I would say eliminating the space for non-state actors. Secondly, the economic growth.
Right.
There's 2 course corrections is being appreciated, is accepted. However, they might at times question the pace of it. And I will admit, the world does ask us on the pace of it. Right. So Pakistan, that message is going out, and there's a lot of new alignments taking place right, in Central Asia, in West Asia, and in Gulf. And you will see as these economic initiatives come close to its completion,
Right.
you'll see a different alignment altogether, which you even heard of late by the meeting which took place between Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and President Rouhani,
Right.
which I think it's a lesson for diplomacy for this region, that Chabahar and Gwadar complement each other. And I think that is what needs to be followed in India. Unfortunately, the media is limiting a lot of space for successive Indian leaders and governments to navigate their relations with Pakistan.
Right.
I have had the pleasure of meeting a former BJP leader, Mr. Atal Bahar Vajpayee, and I would think that if Mr. Vajpayee, Mr. Manmohan Singh, if they were in if they were in government in India, the situation in terms of Pak-India relations would not be what you see today.
Right. Jadoon Saab, coming to you, Bakhtiyar Saab mentioned how it's Indian nationalism that's being, used, and is that, do you think that the reason why there's so much warmongering going on is also their domestic elections also that are being held? Do you think that it is Pakistan is being used as a tool because of that also?
No, I think it is part of the Hindutva political philosophy of Indian leadership. If you look at the political landscape in India, today you'll find that the BJP's internal and international policies are being dictated and being directed by RSS. The Saffron Brigade has become so dominant that even sometimes Mr. Modi is not able to deviate from the course set by the Saffron Brigade. The extremist, radical, Hindu fanatic political parties like RSS, MNS, Shiv Sena, and so on and so forth, have become so dominant as far as the political direction of India is concerned that it would be extremely difficult.
But the anti-Pakistan sentiment it's not. You don't think it has anything to do with the fact that they have their own elections?
Of course, it is. No, I think it is more of the anti-Pakistan sentiment. I spent 2 years in New Delhi in connection with my professional assignment. I had the opportunity to look at the Indian society from very close quarters. You talk with the people on the street, they are very indifferent. When Mumbai took place, I was in New Delhi. And when you go out on the street, you talk about anything, the people of India, by and large, they were literally indifferent what really was happening when this whole, the battle was going on the roads of Mumbai. But when you talk with the media persons, you talk with the members of the civil society and intelligentsia, they are so rabidly anti-Pakistan that you really can't comprehend. The people by and large are so friendly towards Pakistan. So there is a dichotomy. The political leadership literally thrives on that. There are pockets of extremism in India, and there are pockets of modernity and moderate forces as well. Right. Half of the Indian people live below the poverty line. You drive on New Delhi roads and you'll find people sleeping on the road on a massive scale. So I think there are two kinds of Indias. India, the real India, which is literally the kind of a picture it portrays is the picture of poverty, the large poverty, and the pockets of, it's not just the pockets of poverty, but poverty in a very, very large scale, that you would be shocked to see the people, the way they are living life over there. And when Mr. Modi was talking about, battling poverty and improving the conditions of the people, right, increasing the level of the living standard of the peoples of subcontinent, it was so farcical. Immediately after that, they started talking in the language which was the language of warmongering, the language of jingoism. This is the kind of hypocrisy which Indian leadership is literally projecting itself in a way. I strongly believe that you will never find any sane voices as far as today's BJP is concerned. The BJP which was led by Mr. Vajpayee was a different BJP. And today, under the leadership of Mr. Narendra Modi, right, the kind of a party you see which is uncompromising, which is rabidly anti-Pakistan, which believes that it is going to cash on anti-Pakistan policies. You rightly mentioned that they look towards certain opportunities like any local elections as well. They try and they ratchet up the rhetoric against Pakistan, and they even start firing from across the line of control. And even these recent incidents was an attempt to play for the gallery. But unfortunately, they failed to comprehend that when they cross the red line, they cross the threshold, it can become a very dangerous game for the region and for the global community as well.
Right. Bakhtiyar Sahab, you will, I think, agree that this government has had a zero tolerance policy towards militants. But how do we make it more visible for the world to see? We are part of, we are the largest terrorist operation. We are fighting, we are bleeding, our troops are dying, we have suffered. But how do we make it more visible for the world to see?
Good point. I think that's a very, very pertinent question, and that's a challenge which we need to surmount. But you have to also see this, the headwind which we confront. The whole Kashmir freedom struggle gets confused and muddled in what's happening in Middle East, in Syria and Iraq, ISIS, Daesh, different sects, Shia, Sunni, what's happening in Syria, the whole infighting and the whole civil war which has erupted all over that area, Middle East, is being seen through a prism of terrorism post-2001. So that message, somehow, the message emanating from Kashmir gets muffed in that thing. Secondly, Afghanistan. 15 years of military operation, $800 billion have been spent on that without a peaceful, functioning Afghanistan, still a far cry.
Right.
So that failure of I would say the coalition forces, the failure of the West, they do need an easy scapegoat. And thirdly, we have a porous border with Afghanistan. Until you can't exercise sovereignty over your internal policy, your economic policy, or your foreign policy, if you don't have secure borders. And you have like 2,400 kilometers of border, which is almost unmanned. And we have put in motion border management, and I think we should have done it 10 years ago, but it's still going on. And that is the issue which we confront. And yes, we should also admit that the blowback from the Russian jihad, the world moved on. We should have had a better strategy to manage and find avenues for those jihadis to find gainful life in other areas in Pakistan. Secondly, our policy of complete integration of the Afghan refugees has also brought in a lot of issues for Pakistan. Just to give an example, that when this refugee crisis started in Afghanistan, Iran also housed 1 million Afghan refugees, but they kept them in camps near Chabahar. They didn't allow them that space. But we, because we have that Pakhtun homogeneous culture, the ethnic divide isn't that strong here. In fact, it's the same ethnicity. So that kind of seeped into our society, into our economy. Even today, 20% of Afghanistan's population lives in Pakistan. Right. So these are issues which have confronted us. The proxy wars in the past have been through non-state actors. The world has woken up to this extremism and terrorism till in 2001 after 9/11.
Right.
And it takes time to reverse this. And I couldn't agree more with Mr. Jadoon, especially with his experience in living in India. The saffron color which is seeping into India in its establishment, in its security establishment, in its policy-making institutions. This will have a huge repercussions for the region because it will fuel those proponents of Islamic extremism and fundamentalism in reaction to saffron and Hindu fascism. Right. So I think world should take notice of it, and this very Hindu fascism will unravel India itself. The glue which keeps India together is secularism. And India has a lot of issues. It has, in Assam, there was a military operation. In Nagaland, you've had seen Khalistan. Tripura, there's an issue of Dalits. And the
Naxalite movement.
And the Naxalite movement. And you do understand that in India,
right,
and like Pakistan, we have a lot of challenges of poverty alleviation of people, socio-economic growth, and so on and so forth.
Right, and Jadoon, we agree that India confronts its own challenges. As a larger economy, we have our own challenges that Pakistan must fight. Of course, sanity should prevail on both sides, and I think everybody agrees on that. But do you think that we need to change or revamp our foreign policy?
Before I answer your question, I would like to add to what Mr. Khusro Bakhtiyar just said.
Right.
And I think he pointed out something extremely important, that if you talk about, everybody says that maybe Pakistan is not doing enough. Look at the ground realities. What Pakistan has done is unparalleled. The sacrifices the Pakistani nation offered, more than 70,000 people of Pakistan sacrificed their lives while combating the menace of terrorism.
But why is it not seen to be done? That's really...
I will answer your question.
Right.
I will answer your question. Secondly, the successes in the war on terror, particularly the Operation Zarb-e-Azb, is unparalleled, unmatched.
Right.
While on the contrary, Mr. Bakhtiyar pointed out about $800 to $1 trillion spent on the warfare efforts in Afghanistan.
Right.
More than 145 or 50,000 troops at peak time were deployed in Afghanistan. Right. They were not able to suppress the Taliban movement over there. Now we see that Taliban are mostly controlling the rural part of the country, while the urban centers are being controlled by the government.
Right.
Cut loose and run from Afghanistan, leave behind the mess which they themselves created in Afghanistan, and ultimately they put the burden of cleaning the mess they left behind on Pakistan. Is it justified to say that? Pakistan has played a very pivotal role in bringing together the two factions, the Afghan government and the Taliban, on the negotiating table, known as Murray process.
Right.
What really happened was later on, when the news of the supreme leader was surfaced, the process was derailed. Rather, it got derailed because of the Afghan government's intransigence, and ultimately Taliban refused to take part in that process. Pakistan's sacrifices are not being acknowledged the way they should have been acknowledged.
Exactly.
Why we start blaming ourselves that we haven't done enough against the jihadi? Where are those jihadi groups and movements? Pakistan, I remember till 2012 or 13, so many suicide bombings were taking place in Pakistan that people started feeling insecure, and probably some of the people even started relocating. Now, Pakistan has become an island of stability. And around Pakistan, the terror incidents are taking place in Europe, in America, in Bangladesh, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, and even in India, where there is an indigenous movement. Why they forget that the kind of atrocities they are perpetrating against the people of occupied Kashmir, there won't be any retaliation? Everything which takes place in occupied Kashmir is ultimately the blame is put on Pakistan. I think even section of the media becomes so apologetic that we are not trying to project our successes, our sacrifices. What to talk about the global community's acknowledgement, what we have offered, the kind of sacrifices we offered while fighting the menace of terrorism.
Right.
I think we shouldn't be apologetic. What we have done, no other country has done in the world. What we have achieved, no other country has achieved. You compare the achievements of the two armed forces, the international coalition in Afghanistan and Pakistan's armed forces in North Waziristan, and we know that it was so complicated that probably everybody believed North Waziristan was the area where Pakistan's armed forces would never be deployed over there. Ultimately, it was done. Pakistan literally destroyed almost all the sanctuaries. Remaining elements have crossed over into Afghanistan. We have seen recent examples that terrorists coming from Afghanistan and launching terror attacks in Pakistan, and the blame is literally that the allegations are level against Pakistan. I think first of all, we have to make ourselves clear that Pakistan has done what no other country has done in the world. We are proud of it. We are proud of our armed forces.
But it's a very interesting
proud
word
of our
that
people.
you used. You said that we project ourselves. So maybe it's about projection. Maybe, we need to...
We are under-projected.
Right.
Under-projected.
And we need to project ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I have interviewed about 25 to 30 foreign ambassadors based in Islamabad. There was one common thing. Almost every foreign ambassador pointed out that Pakistan's successes, Pakistan's achievements in every sphere of life are under-projected. I think we must acknowledge that.
Right. Bakhtiyar Sahab, we all agree that yes, we are under-projected, but then really it is up to us to project ourselves. We need to tell the world how much we've done. And, like by sending envoys like yourself, the Prime Minister, that's a great initiative. And also the UN speech that he made, he extended himself, he extended Pakistan. He said that bilateral relations between the two countries will, we should have dialogue, and that's depending on Kashmir as the main issue, but that it is dependent on dialogue. And he came across as a very reasonable statesman doing so. But then, how do you perceive as a parliamentarian, how do you think we can project ourselves? That's my question. For all that we've done, Jadoon Sahab talked about it, you talked about it. How do we project ourselves as having achieved so much, as having done so much for terrorism?
There's perhaps we have a weak link, which is the special envoys or one or two speeches or one or two visits. They have a temporary time and space. A weak link is the international media. We have not been able to not use it for our advantage, but we have not been able to allow that international media to find the successes which we have made. And I couldn't agree more with him. Even recently, the British Chief of Army Staff was here, and he acknowledged outrightly in the public domain the kind of successes Pakistan Army and the Pakistan security forces have achieved in combating terrorism and the sacrifices they have given. But the other issue is, as I would again say, selective hearing. The world also has selective hearing based on their national interest.
Right.
Based on, especially in this region, Afghanistan, as I said earlier, Afghanistan policy needs a relook by all the stakeholders. But having said all this, I think as you said, what we need, what our foreign policy should be.
Right.
Foreign policy is not a written document that you have to follow. It's a dynamic process. It keeps changing. It's not a written policy anywhere in the world. But we should leverage our things on one thing. A message will become very clear once we achieve the confidence of saying that there are no non-state actors within our territorial jurisdiction. And for that, your Afghanistan border management is a key to it. Secondly, we should allow ourselves to continue we should pursue our foreign policy where we should engage and draw in other international interest into Pakistan. We have had a history of a long relationship with US and Washington. We have had very close strategic ties with them. In 50s, we had CENTO, followed by the major non-NATO ally. Yes, we have our differences, but we should nurture, we should continue with that relationship because, of course, Washington is a very important capital in today, and we should manage gap, if there is any, and overcome the mistrust. Secondly, even today in Pakistan, United Kingdom is the largest, we are the largest recipient of aid from United Kingdom. The DFID program has almost more than $700 million per year allocated to Pakistan. And we have a huge Pakistani diaspora in UK. UK is our partner, and we should build on those strengths. Similarly with China, we're continuing with that thing. But this economic connectivity should be seen as an instrument for regional growth and an opportunity for the world to invest in and to benefit from it.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining me, Javed Saab, Khusro Bakhtiyar Saab. Thank you for giving us your time. Yes, it is true that the government, the political parties remain on one page as far as Kashmir is concerned. Yes, Kashmir is the #1 agenda, but at the same time, we all need to do more to put Pakistan on the map as a country suffering because of terrorism, not a country that propagates terrorism, a country that bleeds because of its efforts against terrorism. Let's do all we can to tell the world how much Pakistan has done. Thank you so much for joining me today on Perspective.